Oh, that age of young boys. I remember that from our boys. I remember when we moved to Danville about 25 years ago. Most of the houses now in our neighborhood weren't yet there. We were pioneers, along with the Comers, who lived on the other side of the neighborhood. We could just see the smoke from their cooking fire. And in between our two houses was this vast expanse of wilderness full of bears and wolves and other fearsome creatures. And our boys, then 6 and 3, were keenly aware of the dangers and seldom left home without some weapon strapped to their side, a slingshot, a rubber knife, or some other means of protection. People would drive past our home and see our boys and say, "Those are the Quaker children who just moved into that house." We'd lived in our house there in the Great Woods maybe a year or so when a man and a woman bought a lot to the west of us and began building a new house, which fascinated our sons, who would walk up there and watch the builders and converse with the new owners, whose own children were grown and gone, moving far away, as grown children sometimes do, to Plainfield and Avon and other far-flung locales. And the man was the principal at Danville High School. His name was Jim, and his wife was named Virginia. When I first met her, I didn't know what she did. It was never explained to me. But in time, I realized she was an angel sent by God. The best and most important kind of angel, one who teaches small children there are people other than their parents who can love them too. That's a very important job. Our first Easter there, we woke up to find 2 Easter baskets on the back porch filled to the brim with treasures boys would love, one for Spencer and one for Sam. There was no note claiming credit, just the names of the boys written in flowing Palmer script cursive writing like they used to teach in schools. And then at Halloween and Christmas, there were always more baskets. By then, I had seen Virginia leaving the presents on our back porch, but I didn't ruin it by acknowledging her, knowing that there is great joy in the anonymity of generosity. If Virginia had never left anything for our sons, we would still have thought well of her. She had no need to curry our favor, but because generosity was her go-to pattern, she couldn't help but be kind, and we couldn't help but love her. We've been talking about depression, reminding ourselves each week to see your doctor if you're experiencing depression, so that if there are biological causes and roots to your depression, they can be addressed with medication. Beyond that, we have been reflecting on the habits and patterns that can elevate our lives, which brings us to the topic of today's message, the power of generosity and its positive effect on our lives. Our quality of life is directly connected to our generosity with the people in our lives. Our neighbor, Virginia, exuded a sense of vitality and well-being rooted in her generosity. Now, I tried to avoid generalizations. There are enough of them in religion as it is. But I will say this, that I have never in all my life met a generous person who was habitually unhappy. Generosity produces contentment. It is a rule of life as sure as the law of gravity. We see in Jesus this wealth of generosity in which he lived, worked, and walked. The true essence of Jesus wasn't that he, through his death and resurrection, saved us from God's wrath. Can we dispense once and for all with that absurd notion? What a terrible thing to say about God's generosity of spirit, that blood needed to be shed for God to forgive. What a terrible thing that is to say. But isn't that just like some religious practices? To take something noble and generous and turn it into something ugly about God. Let's you and I affirm with all our hearts, minds, souls, and strength the generous compassion of Jesus. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Each person must decide whether they will walk in the light of creative altruism or in the darkness of destructive selfishness." Each person must decide whether they will walk in the light of creative altruism or in the darkness of destructive selfishness. Jesus walked in the light of creative altruism, taught his disciples to do the same, and holds before us that possibility for ourselves. Now, while you and I have experienced this altruism in Jesus, it is also true that others have witnessed this largeness of spirit in the heroes of their faith. This is how important compassion and generosity are. That I don't know of a single religion in the world who has at its center a mean and stingy being. We honor those who exemplify the ideals we revere. We elevate the men and women who personify our highest qualities. Generosity was central to the teachings of Jesus. Think about it and what he taught. When you give, do it quietly. Don't call a reporter. When you're struck on one cheek, turn the other cheek. If someone is cold, give them your coat. If someone is hungry, feed them. If someone is hurt, bleeding on the road, help them. In every instance, generosity, creative altruism. Most of you have met my friend Jim Mulholland. He's been here a time or two and to talk about his organization, Coco Da. Jim and I met the first day of seminary 35 years ago, standing in line to pay for books. We get up, it's time to pay for the books, and Jim was just complaining about how expensive everything was, and it made me think to myself, he must be a Quaker. Except he turned out to be an American Baptist. An American Baptist. It took another 13 years to turn him into a Quaker, but we got there with him. And the thing I like about Jim is that he's one of these people who can sniff out the stench of injustice when the rest of the world acts like we're standing in a rose garden. He can smell it. He can smell it. This past week, the governor of New York State signed a bill to study the possibility of reparations for its black citizens. But Jim beat New York to it by a good 10 years when he compiled a list of black business owners, mechanics, plumbers, electricians, tutors, carpenters, and hired them for anything he needed done and paid them generously, even extravagantly. He said he wasn't going to wait for the government to do the right thing. He was going to start his own reparation program. So Jim and I meet for lunch once a week. We have for years. We eat at the same restaurant, eat, and then solve the world's problems. But it's getting expensive. And I might have to stop, because every week we go, Jim has a way of making sure we have a black server. There can be only one black server in the whole restaurant, and we will end up in their area. I don't know how he does it, but nearly every week he does. And every week after the meal, he tips extravagantly, generously, even outrageously, his own reparations program. And then he looks to me to see what I'm tipping. And I'm trying to hide it from him. I'm down here like this, but he always sees it. And if he doesn't like it, if he thinks I can do better, he says, "Come on, Phil, you're loaded. You have more money than I do. You own a farm, for crying out loud. You can do better than that." He did it just the other day. He started in on me. I looked at him. I said, "You know, we're not sending her to college, Jim." And he gets this crazy look in his eyes and says, "Wouldn't that be fun?" He's got me there. Extravagant kindness, spilling over the sides, generosity is fun. It is fun. Joanne serves as the co-clerk with Becky Horton of our outreach committee. They have monthly meetings. Joanne lets me know every day, "Don't count on me tonight. I'm meeting with the outreach committee." They get to decide what to do with our extra money that we have. And every month after their meeting, Joanne comes out of her office with this big smile on her face, saying the same thing every month. "That was the best committee meeting I've ever been to. I wish I were on that committee." But until I am, I have Jim and his reparations program. We have to decide in life, friends, we have to decide every day whether we will walk in the light of creative altruism or in the darkness of destructive selfishness. We have to decide which path and spirit we will take. I want our prayer today to be a prayer of thanks for Jimmy and for Jim and Becky. I can't begin to tell you what you mean to this meeting. Jimmy, you're a gracious and welcoming spirit. You've never known a stranger. And we've watched you for years now grow and love and succeed. We are so happy for you, and we wish you all the best in your future. Jim and Becky, for the many ways in which you have helped this community with your love, your faithfulness, your caring hearts. When this community thinks of all that we have to be grateful for, you come foremost to mind. Thank you, friends. We wish you every blessing in your search for a new spiritual home for Jimmy that is close to his home. Friends, this week, may the light of God shine in you brightly. May you, amidst a world that can sometimes be dark and painful, may you be light and may you be healing. This is our prayer on this first day morning. Amen. Turn and greet friends.